steps to go live. Yeah, we're now live. And then press the go live button. Well, everything runs.
Hey,
So,
pinch yourself, yeah.
yeah, welcome, Dana. I hope
Hi.
let
Yeah.
everyone a bit drop in. And what I also maybe you can you see the chat on screen? I thought that would be handy too for you, maybe that you
I'm
can
not
now.
seeing it. There's a way to turn it on. Open chat.
Yeah,
There you go. I got
of
the chat opened.
the people have to drop in, of course. So
I got screen. I figured it's screen cap sharing.
screen sharing, and then if you
Uh,
want to use audio sharing as well, then you can also cross the with audio, but you will only have pictures, huh? I assume.
I do have some videos. We don't need to play them.
Okay, yeah, you can, but then you push that button underneath when you share. You see it that you also add the audio, and
Oh,
now,
if I click screen share, and I'll see.
yeah, welcome everyone. Now a bit waiting for everyone to drop in. Hello, everyone. Dear people,
Okay.
welcome. I hope you can all can hear me. I did a test live a few times this afternoon. I hope you all can hear me. And also Dana, of course. Well, Dana, welcome
Thank you.
for now the sixth talk.
That's
And
excellent.
it's the sixth time already.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, I
Your
wouldn't have.
English is getting better, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah,
Sounds
I'm
better.
also more comfortable, it seems. But yeah, thank you so much for the compliment.
You're
And
welcome.
we will be waiting a bit for everyone to drop in. Also on Trovo, everyone, welcome. Well, Dana will also in a bit introduce himself a bit, but because not everyone will know you, Dana.
Hi.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Do you want me to
maybe
do an intro?
yeah, I will first put the notification to Trovo, and Trovo is a nice channel maybe for you to think about to go
I,
live.
I, I think I did set up the account. I still
Okay.
got it in my bookmarks.
Mm-hmm.
I had a little of an issue trying to work it out, but
Okay.
I'm glad you mentioned it because I was thinking about it last night when I was going to bed that I need to get back
Last
on that
night.
site. Yeah, because they just kicked me off YouTube for a week, so
Yeah.
I
Oh,
need an alternative.
yeah.
Go, go ahead.
Well, on well, maybe it's time. Maybe it's good to well first. Of course, welcome everyone because it took time for everyone to drop in. I also see it that everything runs a bit more delay, but I see now some people enter here. Welcome everyone, and of course, my guest here is Dana Durnford from Digitally Visiting from Canada. And Dana, maybe you like to introduce yourself first to the people who might not know you yet. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hope everybody can hear me good. And I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now.
Mm.
I'm used to the chat on the right side. Now it's on the left side. So I'm hoping I got that sorted out. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. And I run the Nuclear for Dummies uh, show, presentations on Japan and the nuclear industry. I do a lot of shows on the 24-hour news cycle of the nuclear industry. But I'm also a researcher, and over the last decade, I've spent 6 years going back and forth to Alaska, from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska, where I spent 4 to 5 months on the ocean without coming home doing species counts. And we used that to quantify the radioactive fallout. And Japan had a series event and what we call a pulse event, and where it lost a lot of the inventories, which was the reactor cores and reactor fuel, and that's described as inventories. And there was an amazing amount compared to Chernobyl, and that the fuel was much more toxic than Chernobyl. And so we study the species, we study the birds, we study the insects in the forest, and at low tide we go out and do species counts, and we do it from one end of the province to the other end of the province, the entire coastline of Western Canada, and we're also doing the same thing now on Eastern Canada, and we've seen dramatic decline in all species. post Fukushima radioactive fallout. And when we get into it, I'm going to show you pictures. I'll describe the buildings to you. I'm going to show you pictures from the expeditions. I'm going to show you headlines that you should be aware of the radioactive fallout and much more of this information that you should know and you won't know unless you find this kind of. Unfortunately, I'm probably the only person I know out there that is bringing me this documentation. Sounds good.
Wow! Oh well, that's great news. Sorry for the interruption. We got a raid. Wow! We got raided by Barry Henderson.
Hi, Barry.
Hello, Barry. Welcome. Oh, so nice of you all. And I apologize, Dana, for this. Also the sound and the alerts, but oh wow!
I don't hear it. I'm not hearing
Oh,
it.
you did not hear it. Okay, because
And I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So have I got the right chat up?
Well, what do you can see? Do you also have a screen of which you can see the live, or do you only see the Jitsi possibly? Because I have now all the chat on screen because I thought and you see all the chats from everywhere.
Because the last times we had the chats, I can send you a screen capture.
Because last previous live stream, we had that you only could see the chats from two channels, and now you can see from all 6.
Yeah, I can't see any on my side, nothing whatsoever.
Oh, a shout out to Barry, by the way. Oh, wow, great. Sorry.
No, I'm not hearing nothing on my end. I don't know about the other people that are watching it, but
yeah, but it will. Fortunately, you don't hear the.
oh yeah.
Well, but anyway, it's a pity that you cannot see the chat because I choose, maybe also good to explain, I choose now the Jitsi, this meeting app, because the previous live stream of which we met, then the internet speed is dropped. So afterwards I saw then our mouths not in sync with what you talked about, and that was a pity.
Wow, eh?
And I find that a pity because I like it that
it is better when it matches up properly.
So I choose for this one, and so. But if you could open, for example, where you watch the live on YouTube or on Twitch on YouTube, then you should see the chat on screen.
Okay. I'm just worried about taking up any extra bandwidth.
Yeah, I understand.
So that I feed out to you even better, right? That if I don't have any excess stuff going on.
Yeah,
by the way, I sent you a screen capture of the screen that I'm looking at on the email just a minute ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can, I don't know if that'll help you, but I can't seem to. So I'm not getting any of the chats. I think I just got the chat between me and you, and I'll just put up a little hi.
Yeah, that is indeed the private chat. So that is that is
so
not a chat for. Well, that is with Jitsi. It is the case that you don't have the online chat, but that is of course because it does not drain in that way. The streaming, yeah, it's a pity.
That's fine.
But, oh yeah, now I see what you see. Okay. Well, we just go ahead with it, and then I will later on. Many people, I will make a summary. Many people say hello to you.
Hi there, folks.
And then with the questions, then I will just give you mention the question later on.
Okay.
So, what's this?
There was a hand or a click on it. Did a hand pop up or something? Okay.
Would like to speak? Well, that is if you have more than 2 people at the same time in the Jitsi, then you can wave your hand, and then I can see, for example, that you want to talk. But
oh, okay, yeah, because there was a button there, and I just clicked it. That's what I can't see what happened on my end, so I clicked it. Hopefully, it went away, and it's not bothering anybody.
And also, many people are greeting you again, and then I will let you do the talk. But also, Sunbeam Sting is restreaming this. Oh, that is so nice. Thank you so much.
Thank
So
you.
that's all promotion for also your story as well, Dana.
Yeah,
And
no,
now
that's
I will
great.
stop babbling and just let go of that you cannot see the chat.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I let
Let's
go. And
now. Was there any questions before I got started? Did you notice any questions in your chat? And so I don't mind the controversial questions. I
mm,
got no issues with any questions.
no, no, I did not see any questions come by. And let's say that in maybe 45 minutes, then we will stop a bit, and then I will go to questions when they come by. Is
Yeah,
that an
yeah,
idea?
sure. Well, you can any time at all.
Yeah.
If you see questions piling up, we can always stop. I'm really good at keeping track, and so it's not an issue for me to stop.
But then I have to
Now,
interrupt you.
and you're going to have to interrupt me because sometimes, because for me this is normal conversation, but for the average person it's not.
Mm,
And so it's great if you stop me sometimes and remind me to slow down my language speed because I talk fast, or any kind of stuff like that. If you want to direct, if you want to go deeper into a certain subject because it's better for people and stuff like that, you go ahead
mm.
and cut me off. It's not an issue. Okay, so I'm gonna go screen sharing for just a minute. I'm going to show everybody the pictures of the reactors. We're just going to take you through the 4 reactors, and I'll explain to you each reactor, and then we'll come back into the screen we're looking at right now, and then we'll go back and forth that way. Does that sound great?
Sounds great. I will check if I don't see yet the screen sharing. Did you
Okay.
already? Um,
The entire screen is allowed. Here we go. So that should pop up. Have we got the entire screen up there right now?
yes, yes.
Okay. And get rid of this. So there's 4 reactors at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in Japan, in northern Japan, and they were hit by a tsunami for around 1,200 kilometers of the coastline, took out the majority of the telephone poles, the power systems, and all of these plants need external power to run. They don't run on their own power, and so if you lose power, within 50 minutes to an hour, they start to melt down. And meltdown means the fuel itself overheats and the cladding burns off. It burns at around 1800 degrees. And the pellets of uranium plutonium in the fuel rods will ignite at these temperatures, and they will burn 5,000 and 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And so at these temperatures, it runs away. So originally, when the fuel cladding on the outside of the fuel rods melt down, they produce a lot of hydrogen. Hydrogen can detonate because it'll displace the oxygen in your building. And then when you introduce oxygen back into the building, that'll cause it to detonation. Also, sparks and stuff like that can cause it to detonate. So when emergency lights come on, that could have caused it to detonate. What you're looking at right here is reactor 1. Now, this at the top of the building was 4 decades of reactor cores. Each reactor core was about 100 times the size of Chernobyl in uranium and plutonium. The Chernobyl reactor was a graphite reactor, and it was a brand new reactor building, about 2 years old, where these buildings are 40 years old. And all the fuel, for some reason, was kept at the top of the building. So if you did have an event, how were you able to retrieve the fuel and take it out of harm's way? Now, the reason it's there is because you don't have a repository in Japan to hold the fuel, let alone anywhere else on the planet. This is standard practice for a lot of the reactors, and these are what they call the boiling water reactors. And the United States has over 70 of the exact designs. They're exactly identical in colors and the interior, everything about it. Each building is exactly the same. So this building lost up to 10 million pounds of fuel. And this fuel is pure uranium, pure plutonium. It was 100% loss of the fuel pools and the reactor cores. And Chernobyl didn't have those particular attributes. And Chernobyl wasn't pure uranium, pure plutonium. This is March the 12th. This was the detonation. And this is a grainy footage, and it's the only footage we actually have. It's from about 30 miles away from a security camera. and a very high quality. So when you zoomed in, the buildings here I'm circling, I don't know if you can see the mouse on the screen, but there's two buildings to the right on the bottom. They're 19 stories. They're 65 meters, 190 feet buildings. They're 50 meters wide. And so once any nuclear scientist on the entire planet, any academic in the nuclear industry, any professor, any nuclear engineering on the entire planet, when they seen these pictures, they knew the fuel pools and the reactor cores were gone. Now they hid that from the population, and even today that's denied. But the evidence we have is incontestable, it's unassailable. So reactor one, they built a containment, um, a Kevlar sarcophagus, and what they done was built this frame, and hopefully this picture gives you some context of how big the frame is, and by proxy then how big the buildings are. You can see a person, I'll put him in the center of the screen for you. And when I zoom back out, now that piece is the bottom piece. There's four pieces. So at the very bottom of the screen is that top part right up there. And so there's four of those parts. And then they use big panels, these panels, and you can see the crane lifting one of these big panels to your left of the building. And they encased with a Kevlar sarcophagus for the first 5 years. They removed all of this. Now, that stuff there is so toxic that if you took a square meter or a square foot of it and brought it to a subway and left it there, everybody for the next million years that walked past it would die that day. That's how toxic it actually is. So they completely encased it in a Kevlar sarcophagus. And think of Kevlar as like a tarp, but it's bulletproof. And it's like a tarp, right, where it's like a blanket, in other words. It's not a solid structure. But because it has the framing, now this is reactor 2. We have the heat signature in the top right-hand corner. The building is the only building that basically looked like it stayed intact. And what that means, though, was that the reactor core and the fuel pool, there's two fuel pools at the top of the building. I'll give you more explanation of that coming up. The fuel pools at the top of the building could have up to 6 reactor cores at least in them. And they all went down into the earth in the proverbial China syndrome. But basically what it means is it dug itself at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures down into the earth. And as it goes down into the earth, it cannibalizes the steel, the rebar, the cement, the gravel, the rocks, and it atomizes and aerosols, ionizes and radiates that material and releases it as radioactive plumes also. And so you don't just got to worry about plumes from the physical fuel. You have to worry about plumes from the material that's being cannibalized, heated to extraordinary temperatures, and then atomized and aerosol, ionized and radiated. So in other words, if you take a cement block and you incinerate it, all those atoms now are harmful atoms. They're deadly to everything with replicating cells. And so that was a complete loss of reactor 2. This burned constantly for several days at enormous temperatures, and then it just tunneled its way down into the earth. And in front of this building was 1 million sieverts. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. And so 1 million sieverts meant you could never get nowhere near the building, even if there was no damage. You still couldn't get near the building. And so reactor 1 and 2, you got reactor 1 to the right and reactor 2 to the left. All of these buildings are identical, and they lost their entire 4 decades of reactor cores and their running reactors. Reactor 4 to your left is completely gone. And so when you look at the might just be a bit bigger for us. When you look at the destruction and the material, you're looking at the very bottom of the building. Now, they should have took the building all the way to the ground. There's nothing physical left. And if you go there, you will die instantly. To the right is just some of the many, many medias in 2013, 2014 that claimed the building wasn't destroyed and that they were at the physical top of the building. So CBS in your top left-hand corner is Seth Dorn. Seth Dorn is the senator's son, And CBS is the biggest media in the United States of America. BBC, Rupert Winfield Hayes, to your right, claiming he's in the fuel pool of reactor 4, and BBC is the biggest media in the United Kingdom. In the bottom right-hand corner, you got ABC, Cecilia Vega, who's currently at the White House Press Club for CBS, and she's also claiming to be in the Reactor 4 building that doesn't exist. And that's the biggest media in Australia, and CNN is an incredible propaganda from America. 24-hour news channel is very popular and is free for the majority of the homes in North America. So it's a propaganda machine. But the buildings actually physically don't exist. And so it's very striking that all these medias will come out and make this assertion that they're in a building that physically doesn't exist. So when you line the buildings up, you got building 1 to your left, building 2 looks intact, building 3, which we're about to get up on right there, is very grainy. And these are the original footage, and building 4 in the background. And I'm just going to take you to building 3 was a mixed oxide fuel reactor. And this is reclaimed uranium, reclaimed plutonium. And the problem with that, of course, is that the regular material, when it goes through a chain reaction, is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And so when you put it through a chain reaction a second time, it's considered extraordinarily poisonous. So just a physical atom could ultimately lead you to be sick decades down the road because it sequesters in your body. And it emits energy at the speed of light every second. But the stuff from reactor 3, the emissions from reactor 3, were extraordinarily dangerous, what they call hot particles. Everything's a hot particle. And when I talk about these atoms, you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. And so imagine just one of these atoms. When you can't see 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, imagine how insignificant one atom actually should be. But the fact is, it triggers an autoimmune attack in your body, and your body doesn't have an immune system that recognizes the physical atoms that are man-made. They don't come from the solar system. And we call them man-made, anthropogenic man-made isotopes, because they're man-made, they're unique. We don't find them in space. They're not the stardust. They're not the elements of all the species. So we're acclimated as humans, and all the species, of course, are acclimated to the normal elements of the solar system. We are totally immune to it. We have no issues with it. We utilize it for all kinds of things in our bodies. But the stuff from the anthropogenic the man-made elements, our body attacks it with white blood cells for the rest of our lives. I'll go more into detail on that coming up. So to the right, they're pretending, this is BBC, Rupert Winfield Hayes, as I showed you earlier at reactor 4, is now at reactor 3, or pretending to be at reactor 3, which doesn't exist. And he's also pretending that he's at the fuel pool at the top of the building that don't exist. And so they built this structure on top of the remains of reactor 3, which is to your left. And they don't physically touch that because you can see it's so fragile. And that the reactor cores and the fuel pools were at the very top of the building. So they built these sophisticated, and Toshiba was involved in it, they built these sophisticated contraptions, as I call them, off-site. They brought it in and assembled it. Humans can't survive there. And so the ones that you might see in some pictures, I don't particularly have them, but you might see them on the internet, those people probably would have died that day or that week from those exposures. And so when you look from the side view, and this is a very rare view, this was extrapolated from a single photo that was accidentally released by the media in Japan. And this photo was so high detail. In fact, I might have just give me 1 second. I'll shoot ahead.
Yeah, because while you're searching it, that's an interesting story. I tried to find it on other spots, but you catched these HQ pictures. They were very, very quickly gone. Huh?
Yeah, and what happened? That's right. And this is the picture in particular. Now, this is not the high quality one.
Mm-hmm.
So this picture in particular, this is not the right one, was the whole site. I messed it up, did I? Here we go. We'll try that again.
Yeah, take it easy.
Okay, this picture right here was the picture that I was able to zoom in on and extrapolate that this containment, so-called containment above it, there was nothing underneath it. And then when you look at reactor 4, which is this one right here we're going to get to, you can see all the debris, and you can see the debris on the roof. They didn't clean it. And you can see all kinds of debris on the side of it. You can see there's nothing symmetrical. They had built these contraptions, and we'll cover that a bit. But and so Japan, after that, you couldn't download any pictures from the majority of Japanese media after that. Up to that point, you were able to download any picture from their websites. They turned off the ability to download pictures from all the websites because I was able to take these single picture, and then zoom in and able to extrapolate that they didn't clean up the debris around the building. So how could it be perfect inside the building, right?
Mm. Mm.
And let me go back because this does that to me sometimes, I notice. And here's another picture.
And meanwhile, are people greeting, and also people maybe someone greeted you as well, who said, "Hey, I know this guy for a long time on YouTube, Yoshimi7, Robstar." And maybe it does ring a bell, but people greet you still, and also someone mentions Dana and Ray and T. Good combo. I
Yeah,
found that
great.
a funny remark. So
Thank
further
you.
on, no questions yet. And maybe can I ask you to slower your tempo? That it's
Sure.
for the
No, thank
people.
you for reminding me. That's important you remind me because I got a tendency to run away when I'm talking.
Yeah, it's your enthusiasm. I
Yeah.
understand.
So you got Chernobyl to the left. I'm almost finished. I'm going to duck out of this and come back into the conversation here in a moment. So to your left is Chernobyl, which is a single reactor. It was graphite. To your right is Fukushima. There was 4 reactors, and at the top of each reactor building was 2 fuel pools. So Chernobyl was a single reactor, was made of graphite. It was a very small reactor, and it had no fuel pools. But Fukushima had 4 reactors. They were completely destroyed. And at the top of each building was 2 reactors. So it's 8 fuel pools. Each fuel pool could have 5 or 6 reactors, and each one of them much larger than Chernobyl. And so the difference between Chernobyl and Fukushima is insane. But now Chernobyl was very, very, very bad. And Chernobyl, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, the United Kingdom. And so that's pretty significant, 3,000 kilometers away when you close 9,400 farms because of radioactive fallout.
Mm.
And another headline that people, I would imagine, would find interesting was there was steam coming out of the ground for extended periods of time. The steam was at lethal doses. At 6 places, it was at 10 sieverts per hour, where the earth was cracked from the China syndrome. And the steam coming out of the ground was if you walked through it or near it, that was a lethal dose. You would die right away. So 4 sieverts per hour coming out of the ground on its own would have been a catastrophic event, which was 20% more than June. This was October, so June, July, August, September, October. That's 5 months. And what that meant was you could not go near these buildings because that was a lethal dose. I'll come back over to you guys. That was a lethal dose. That was a lethal dose. And that's the share the screen there. We know. Yeah. And
You want to share more, or
no, I'm going to come back over with you guys if I can remember how to do it.
yeah,
So I should be stop sharing, right? There we go.
yeah,
So am I back to the normal screen now?
yes. Now you
Okay,
see
great.
the both of us next to each other. So
Okay,
yeah,
beautiful.
and I realize when you're talking about. By the way, I did. You don't see that, but I have on screen, and that is on top of the both of us. I did some effort in adding the feed into meters, so that people can then see that as well during the live stream. So that's nice too. And it was great to see that comparison with a human body towards how big these buildings are, because
Right.
that was great that you
Gives you
added that.
scale. Yeah,
the
it gives you
scale,
scale.
because I realized also, while again, I've watched many live streams of you, and you do a lot of repetition, which in my opinion is amazing. For me, it works great, but
Yeah.
that there. I really wanted to talk about, maybe not now, but I had a feeling like it seems like there is a kind of, yeah, something in between in the energy, what makes it so hard to grasp, because it's maybe
It is.
invisible, but
Yeah, yeah.
that's, and I really am curious if other people experience that by hearing this matter, and this information. And for me it felt like it's like there was a giant blueprint of, you're not allowed to let the info in or something. Or
There
do you
seems to be
maybe
a
feel
block.
what I
Yeah,
mean?
I get a lot of that.
Yeah.
And so, like, I show you the documentation because I know how difficult it is to absorb it.
Mm.
And uh, another thing about this was very difficult to gather up all the information that I got. Originally, there was nobody out there explaining the reactors. There's still not. And so it was really difficult to assert which was reactor one, reactor two, reactor three, reactor four. Excuse me. And headlines and stories that originally came out, when they would talk about the reactors, they were very vague. And when they showed a picture of the reactor, they wouldn't actually tell you which was what, whether that was reactor one, two, three, or four, or five, or six. And there was a complete disconnect. And so one of the first chores was trying to identify everything on site, and even just trying to get that straight in my head, because the secrecy surrounding the industry is really unusual. And,
Mm.
and the way to understand that is La Hague, fuel reprocessing facility in France. It's
Mm.
called La Hague, and they have 500 security guards. So
Whoa.
if me and you were to go near this site, they're going to accost you. And if you're taking pictures, they're going to take your memory card. You're not going to be allowed to keep those pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the idea, is in case there is an accident, you don't have a precedence to tell a story. You can't say, well, that used to exist here, and this would exist here, because here's the documentation. So it's very difficult to get your hands on the information of what we discovered over many years here. And
Mm.
so I've been covering nuclear for about 20, 22 years, basically. And but Fukushima is the one that kind of opened up. The world started asking the question, what the hell is Fukushima? And uh, my question was, how do we quantify harm? So was there harm that happened in North America? And so I'm just going to screen share again for a minute. I'm going to show people um, I'm going to show people another folder that is going to show us radioactive fallout. And in this one, what you're going to see when it pops up here, these are different models based on information released by TEPCO, which is considered the operator. And TEPCO actually went bankrupt right away and then was nationalized by the Japanese government, which meant they co-opted it, they took it over. Because TEPCO is just a corporation, and we're talking about a catastrophic event. And so the radioactive isotopes, Neptunium 239, which decays to plutonium 239, which is considered one of the worst plutoniums. And the model that I'm going to put in front of you is based on 20 days. On the 31st of March 2011, you had Neptunium covering the entire planet. And the next one alongside of it is based on the day after, um, April the 1st. And so what you're seeing was dispersions, but the models are not based on the documentation that I showed you earlier. These models are only based on venting. So they didn't acknowledge the meltdowns, they didn't acknowledge the releases, and these models are only based on the official release, which was based on a law, because they had no electricity. You had 1,200 kilometers of the coastline was stripped. There was 2,000 square miles of Japan torn out to sea, which is the size of Texas. So the next one is radioactive fallout model of plutonium. These models are but also based on 20 days to your left and 21 days to your right. Now, there are other pictures from this group projecting or showing the radioactive fallout. This is plutonium 239 dispersion. This is an incredible amount we're talking about. Just reactor 4 alone had roughly 21,000 pounds of plutonium in the fuel. The fuel is made out of plutonium and uranium, mostly uranium 235, but they need plutonium as another catalyst. And plutonium was named after the devil because it's so toxic. And so we're talking about particulates so small that you can put 200 million atoms on a head of a needle, but you can't see it. And a single atom, when it gets in your body attacks it immediately and for the rest of your life, every second of your day, with white blood cells. And these particles are in your body. They're pulsing energy at the speed of light every second, and they pulse it in every direction. And what that means, though, is it destroys all kinds of DNA and chromosomes and cells with each pulse. So your body has to try to repair every one of them every second, and you're talking about millions damaged. But it also has to attack the source with white blood cells. So it floods that air with white blood cells. That's a cause and effect. It's instant reaction, and it's a permanent reaction. And what that means to you, if you just got a single atom in your body, is that your body now has less oxygen, has less red blood cells carrying oxygen and nutrition throughout your body. So for every white blood cell, you have to displace a red blood cell. So the more you get in it, the less red blood cells you have, and less red blood cells, less oxygen nutrition. And if you bioaccumulate enough of it in your body and you're creating a massive amount of white blood cells, they call that leukemia. And it's permanent. So this was a study quantifying radioactive sulfur. And this is described in a study as sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. And this was a phenomenon that they knew about in the 50s and 60s with ocean testing, that the sulfur from the salt water would create a spherical ball, and the ball would ingest uranium, plutonium, and americium, and neptunium, all the radioactive particles, and became super hot particles. And the plume models were shown 1 million becquerels a square meter over the west coast. This was xenon 133. So I showed you neptunium 239. I showed you a plume of plutonium 239. This is a model from zirconium or xenon 133 at stunning numbers, 1 million becquerels a square meter. And so this causes whole body x-rays for all the insects and birds, mammals, animals. And in the forest, it causes the destruction of the bacteria and the fungus, which supports the ecosystem. Okay, and so there was also another study of radioactive iodine 129.
Can I maybe interrupt Dana for a question?
Yeah.
What for me, I mean, I am very interested in the subject for the planet and so on, but with Becquerel, I can maybe some other people who watch this video know exactly what they are, but can you maybe
No, that's right. Yeah.
shortly make a summary? Also for me, I'm very honest. I still let more info in.
It's awkward, isn't it? It's trying to understand it. And I have a 10, and you can correct me after, or you can ask me more questions. So a Becquerel is when you take an atom, and the atom, because it's anthropogenic, man-made physical atoms. These are radioactive atoms, and they're toxic to everything with replicating cells. And what they do is they pulse energy at the speed of light every second. That pulse of energy each second is considered a Becquerel. And so an atom of plutonium will pulse at the speed of, almost at the speed of light every second for 240,000 years. And so it retains that energy, doesn't lose its energy for long past the human experience. But when it's in your body, it's pulsing that energy. That's wrecking chromosomes and DNA and cells, and your body has to respond to it like it would. Like if you cut your finger, your body will create endless amount in all your joints, not just your spleen, but your body will create white blood cells in all your joints, and they will flood the area and repair that cut in your finger. And about 7 days, 8 days later, majority of the cut is gone. It repaired it. But
Mm.
with these atoms in your body can't doesn't work that way. So it doesn't repair it. It tries to build a sarcophagus around it. And it usually takes 20, 30 years to build a sarcophagus around it. And we call that a tumor. But during that period, it's going to detonate every second. And that's called a Becquerel. And so all the isotopes have their own types of decays, which we call Becquerels, is the best way to describe it.
Mm.
It's a pulse of energy in every direction, like an explosion, at the speed of light. And so your body just freaks out and floods that area for the rest of your life with white blood cells. And this compromises your immune system because you're sending all these white blood cells to the one place. Your immune system is not getting all the extra red blood cells with the oxygen nutrition that it needs to maintain its health. And your body now becomes more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign, could never hurt you, like flus will all of a sudden kill the elderly because their immune system was compromised by the bioaccumulation of the radiation. And the problem with the physical atoms is you can't smell it, you can't hear it, you can't feel it, you can't taste it, you can't pick it up, you can't perceive it, you can't see it. And so it's very sneaky because you don't, like a flu, your nose, and you might get a headache and you got aches and pains. But with these atoms in your body, you have no way of determining they're in your body.
Mm.
And they come in many different pathways. We'll talk about that a little bit coming up. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah,
It's a
amazing.
different.
Yeah, it is, and it happens to be. I see in the chat also come by that someone seems to recognize it, or I don't know. But Sunbeam Sting says, "Interesting. 2 times now I had a headache, and when I hear Dana talk, it goes away. Maybe it's the sound of his voice."
Well, that was
Well,
nice of you.
that's a great compliment. But
Thank you very much. May I have
yeah.
another?
But it's really it's serious. I watch now so many live streams of you, and I first of all I am
It's so hard, isn't it?
amazed by that I don't see more people doing a subject
I'm
like
shocked.
this
Yeah,
so
I'm
extendedly.
shocked. It's
I
very difficult, isn't
myself,
it?
I mean, I feel myself. No, well, let's say I can pretty much do take up some knowledge and some
It,
intelligence.
no, but
But
it's not an easy
it's
subject.
like, well, a demonized. I really feel
Yeah.
it's demonized to let the knowledge in, because this is why I am
Oh.
so stubborn and so determined. No, I want to know. I want to know what it
Yeah.
is, and
And
I.
once it resonates for you,
Mm,
then you can extrapolate all kinds of other things on your own. Right.
exactly.
And so every single show, and I usually typically do 5 presentations a week that are about 2 hours. Currently, I'm offline because I
Mm.
smurfed up and said something, and
Yeah.
they punished me for the next week. I can't do any shows. And but generally, I do 5 shows a week. I've been doing this for about a decade straight. If I'm not out on research expeditions, I'm generally doing live shows. If I'm not in the hospital, I've been in the hospital a lot this year.
Yeah. Maybe
And as
that's
soon as I get out, I'm
you.
doing
Do you want to
shows.
share? Do you? Because I was not sure because of I honor privacy, but do you like to talk a bit about the? Yeah, you had health issues. Let's.
Well, I had in February, I had 3 heart attacks in a row, and my valves were all closed off, and so I spent 21 days in intensive care, and I was going downhill, waiting to get the surgery to get. They weren't sure if they were going to do open heart surgery or put stents in, and so they decided to put 7 stents in, and they flew in an American team apparently that came in specifically just to do me and then flew away again. And that's kind of a badge of honor in many ways. Obviously, somebody with a lot of weight decided I was worth keeping around.
hmm.
And because there was no way I was going to survive without that kind of attention. But I also have cancer in the kidney that I was supposed to get a kidney out. And then the day before, which was a few weeks ago, I was supposed to get the kidney out. I ended up throwing up a lot of blood. So I had an
Mm.
upper GI tract tear. and then that was resolved, but that ended up taking up another 14, 15 days rather. And so now this last 4 or 5 days, I'm starting to feel Dana, like I'm Dana again, ready to go to war again. And because I've been to war against the nuclear industry for over 20 years, and everybody else should join the war because they're at war against you. So, and I'll explain that. I'm going to jump back to the screen sharing to finish out the last stuff I was showing to you, and I'll come right back over to you guys. And we should be, yeah, we're sharing screen. So let's come back over to that window. So the radioactive fallout, um, this is a model based on 20 days of radioactive fallout. But you can't see it or perceive it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it. But it's there. It's assimilated into your all plants, all trees, all your fields, is into your drinking water. And so you're washing your clothing, you're taking baths and showers in it, you're washing your food, you're doing your dishes in it, and you're consuming it. And so are your loved ones and the elderly and the vulnerable, like your elderly and the children. Children are about 1,000 times more vulnerable than an adult because they're developing. And so this stuff gets into the bones where it mutates the stem cells and it saturates because there's so much. It saturates the thyroid glands. And this is what the radioactive iodine 131. Now, this is 20 million particles per liter of rainfall. So you have to take this serious. This was a Canadian study, and I have another study of the iodine 129, which the ratio should be 31 to 1. So for every iodine 131, by the way, there should be 10 times more iodine 132, 30 times more iodine 133, 31 times more iodine 129. The iodine 132, the iodine 133 are 9 times more effective than the iodine 131 at ionizing and radiating your thyroid glands. And what that means is we're talking about so much that your thyroid becomes saturated with these, and there's many more isotopes besides the iodines, but they're prolific, as you can see. The biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods, by the way, is not iodine, it's the curium isotope. Curium isotope, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium isotopes. And so the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is the curium, which is what we call a nuclear meltdown curium. But it also produces up to 1,000 different kinds of fission products that are harmful to everything with replicating cells. So what happens is, this is evidence, is that the thyroid glands are saturated. So the insects, the birds, the mammals, the animals, and children in particular, and elderly, is they're producing a prolific amount of radioactive hormones because there's so much radioactive iodine sequestered in the thyroid gland. And the thyroid gland is about 3 centimeters by 5 centimeters. And there was a study originally came out of Japan of 13,646 children out of 38,000 with thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters, which is significant when your thyroid gland is only 3 centimeters by 5 centimeters. That's actually a great big tumor. Mm-hmm. And so your thyroid is also producing a huge amount of hormones, in this case, radioactive hormones for the pituitary gland, which is in your brain, and your other glands become saturated with these radioactive hormones. And this is catastrophic to the insects, the birds, and the small mammals and animals in particular. And so it starts to sterilize them, and they stop reproducing. And for insects, you might have many generations each year, whereas with bigger animals, there's only a generation every couple of years. So it shows up in the insects first, and then if the insects stop reproducing, then insect-eating birds, of course, will start manifesting issues with it. And what we've seen in 2020, which really shows the story, was 195 species of insect-eating birds. I'll come back over for a second. 195 species of insect-eating birds showed up emaciated. There was millions and millions of them in the United States, and these were the migratory birds. And so 195 species of insect-eating birds, all showing up emaciated and over a period of time over many different states, quantifies the. Now, when was the last time a lot of people cleaned insect off their windows? It probably seemed like you never did. But if you go back 8, 9 years, you used to clean insect on your windows. But over the last 6 or 7 years, you didn't have to. It was like, nah, there never was that many insects, and there never was that many birds. You start thinking without realizing it, because people become complacent because they have no reason to think otherwise, right? And they forget. You know how your mind gets caught up in Hollywood, it gets caught up in the media, and you
That's
have to
true,
get rid
yeah.
of information, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the what we discovered, and I showed you studies of Neptunium 239, a study of plutonium 239, a study of the iodine xenon 133, another study of the iodine 131, and then we know that all you need to know is one isotope, and you can basically extrapolate, if you're an academic in the industry, many of the isotopes and ratios by doing something like that. Okay, so I'm going to finish this part out, because now it'll start to make sense for everybody when if they're able to catch this much of the show up to here, then it'll resonate, hopefully. But don't feel bad if you don't resonate. Okay, so
Mm.
I left you at 20 million Becquerel particles of radioactive iodine 131 per liter. And so there was another study of 220 million atoms, which is the right ratio per iodine 131 of the iodine 129. And this has a 15 million year half life. There's 10 half lives. And so it's 150 million years before that disappears. These are anthropogenic man made. There is some natural iodine 129 on the planet, which is different from the anthropogenic man made. They conflated them to confuse you on purpose.
And that
The industry,
man-made, sorry to interrupt, that man-made, that is that iodine 131, or did I?
yeah, all
Okay.
of them I'm showing you are the man made
Mm-hmm.
ones,
All
but
right.
all of them have, except for the plutonium,
Mm-hmm.
have and curium have a natural one in the ecosystem, but it's not the same isotopes.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually different. They mash them together specifically to confuse the population when they try to look up the documentation. And the numbers we're talking about, 220 million atoms per liter. We've never heard tell of anything like this before in radioactive fallout. This was a study out of central Canada, and this quantifies the what I talked about for the insects and the birds and the mammals and the animals, where the thyroid glands would have been saturated. Now, this stuff doesn't just go to the thyroid gland. It sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones too. But because your thyroid makes the hormones for your bodies and for the insects and birds and mammals and animals, it's very pertinent. It's very important. And detected in the aquifers to supply drinking water to large numbers of people also quantifies that you would have been saturating the thyroid glands, not just airborne, but through the drinking water, through the shower, because you absorb so much water. And then let's get a few more in, because it gets very. So there was another study of from France showing 1 million to 10 million becquerels, which are atoms pulsing energy every second. So each time you think of a becquerel, think of an atom, and that atom might pulse energy for 1 million years. In this case, it pulses energy for 300 years, but you can extrapolate. There was many more. So cesium 137 plume from France's government, which is the IRSN, was showing 1 million to 10 million becquerels a cubic meter of air on March the 24th. On March the 24th. And I don't know why that's not in line. There it is right here. Let me bring up this one. And this is the radioactive fallout. This never goes away. And so some of these stories might be fairly old. That doesn't matter, because it doesn't go. A lot of this doesn't go away for hundreds, if not millions of years. And so that's the evidence. That's the documentation. And I know the industry will, they're old headlines. Well, it doesn't matter. They're the documentation. When the accident happens, that's the original headlines. That's the most important headlines you could ever have.
Mm-hmm.
And so 1 million to 10 million times after Fukushima. Okay, so this model I'm going to bring up next is the explosion to the right of reactor 3. And to your left in the bottom is 27 days after the radioactive. So the green to your left is the radioactive plume. So you can see by 27 days later, April the 7th, 2021, the entire planet is covered in radioactive fallout. So all the models agree on the radioactive fallout, uh, on the radioactive numbers, the dates, the disposition, the radioactive fallout. Radiation data from Seattle may be withheld by the government for national security purposes. But you didn't pay them to hide it away from you. You gave them the money for this once in a lifetime event, the monetary, the education, and everything else, so you can be warned. And what they discovered right away was Fukushima radioactive releases are so great, the aerosols in Washington were 100,000 times normal. And this was it was either Krypton 133 or Xenon 133. And we just got two more to get through, and I'm going to play now, this was upgraded from 100,000 times to 450,000, and it persisted for weeks. But it doesn't go away for thousands of years. So just the plume itself persisted. And here's what the plume from the earlier one, the cesium-137, I'm going to come in and bring it all together in a moment. And there shouldn't be any sound with this. We'll let this play, hopefully. And this model was based on 16 days of radioactive fallout from France. 16 days from the tsunami, not 16 days from the last reactor detonating. Or no, this one is 31 days. And you're now at the 27, 28, 30 days, right? 31, 32 days. So that was 32 days of radioactive fallout from France of the cesium-137 at around 1 million to 10 million atomic decays every second per cubic meter of air. The plume covers the entire planet, which means this is not a game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so make sure I got everything there. All right, now so let's come back over. And I don't know if there was any questions popping up. We
Yes,
can.
there are. So this is a great moment to go to the questions. I will skip a bit. Oh yeah, to come back to when you were talking about the insects, I saw also someone mentioned it here in the chat that insects like bees were less, also in the Netherlands, and that is Robstar1. You see no bees and birds anymore in Holland. And
Wow.
yeah, another comment is that you always heard birds in the morning waking you up, and that this person also felt it has become less. And Nobby says there's always been loads of birds in China too, but that has also another cause. What I seem to remember of that certain leader who ordered that every bird should be gone from. I don't know the exact details, but I know that is also part of why there are no birds in China or not in the cities. But you may know that too, Dana,
Right,
about
I
that. Huh?
follow it. I cover that stuff every couple of weeks. Yeah, die-offs.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ray. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So, Artis Liberalis on YouTube has a question, and I put it in the chat. Then you also can
I
read
see it
it.
there now. Yes, right.
But I will also read it out loud. Question: lactose intolerance and artery blockage. You can have a degree of intolerance that you might not notice yourself. About 40% of the world has some kind of intolerance and get heart problems.
Right, and so like death by heart attacks is very common right after a nuclear accident and long after, depending on how much was released. And Japan, the death rates might give the creeps to some people, where you're seeing 14,000 extra people die in a single month, a statistical abnormality that, compared to any other year in that month, had spiked. But there was many other harbingers of radioactive illnesses. The 6 out of 10 Fukushima children were showing up with diabetes within the second year. There, in the first year, or in 2019, there was a study, congenital heart disease for neonates and infants rose by 14.2% per 100,000 live births. So, out of every 100,000 children in Japan, the entire country, 14,200 need open heart surgeries. So, these are absurdly uh, blatant illnesses that can be directly, and they suggested this was Fukushima effect. And we know this because of Chernobyl also. Chernobyl was an absurd amount of orphanages in Belarus and Ukraine of disfigured and abandoned
Mm.
children, and that's still going through today. And each year there's around 6,000 open heart surgeries, what's known as the Chernobyl heart. And there's a documentary about that out there from a foundation in the United Kingdom that tries to help the children. And
Mm.
I got all these orphanages, and the children that are functional, if you ask them what they want, they basically a TV or a radio because they have no entertainment whatsoever. And so I used to quite often ask the question of how come the nuclear industry, which helps all kinds of boys and girls clubs and everything else, don't help these orphanages? Because it would just a fraction of the money that they throw into the boys and girls clubs in their own cities and communities, if they just took a fraction of that and donated, you can help the lives of thousands of these
Mm.
disfigured and deformed and abandoned children who live
Would it
in
not be?
hopelessness.
Would it not be that they then are afraid of these people who support the
Yeah,
nuclear?
that's just,
That they are afraid. Oh,
oh, 100%. Yeah,
then we acknowledge that
that's
it's
right. Yeah, that's
dangerous.
right.
That's
But I
kind.
do that because that's in their face. Eh?
Mm.
Because a lot of the world doesn't comprehend there's cause and there's a instant issue going on here that on the one hand they're donating to all the boys and girl clubs in their community just to win them over, and but on the flip side all the boys and girls in the orphanages are destitute and
Mm.
victims. They're literally victims of the nuclear industry that are unseen and unheard of. But if you look up documentary Chernobyl Heart or anything to do with the orphanages, you'll see pictures that are just gut wrenching. And I'll do entire presentations on them sometimes
Mm.
because I think everybody should be forced to face the truth. And my detractors are just the pro nuclear community. So I don't have any actual detractors. All I have is 1,000 public relation firms that are trying to justify their wages. And so they got no one to attack. There is no anti nuclear effective movement out there. And I've been trying to create it for all these years by running these educational programs 5 days a week. And so I've bankrupted and ran myself into the ground over and over and over, but I always
Mm.
managed to find a way back. I'm just trying to do educational programs,
Mm.
and I do research. In fact, last week I went out and actually done field studies, and we found over 100 kilometers, one bird every 11 kilometers. So for every 11 kilometers that we drove in the woods, now I
Mm.
drove 100 kilometers out away from here. That's where we basically ended up in the middle of nowhere, where there's barely any kind of, it's off the beaten path. We're using quads, and I have big cameras and gimbals where I took like 30-minute footage at a time and posted it live, just the raw footage rather, up at my website, and people can see it with their own eyes.
Mhm.
That And another thing I'll be doing all winter is going out looking for tracks like the last number of winters. After every fresh snowfall, I would go out and look for tracks, and there'd be no tracks whatsoever. And you talk to the local bird hunters or rabbit hunters, and
Mhm.
they say they don't even hunt anymore. There is no rabbits, there is no birds.
Yeah,
And
now you're talking about it. I was wondering because I catched in your sometimes in your live streams also one where you were driving for kilometers and then hardly saw any bird.
yeah,
But it would be nice to maybe talk at a certain moment with people, or do they don't maybe want for privacy reasons not being interviewed by you, or that would be also maybe
100%. Yeah,
nice.
I don't bother with the interviews because they don't know what they're talking about. and that only
Mm.
confuses people because
Mm.
they're going to blame it on climate change. They're going to blame it on whatever they're
Oh, the
told.
people
They're
who
they're going to
also
regurgitate
noticed
whatever the
that.
media tells them, right?
Ah,
So
okay.
it's counterproductive to interview them
Mm-hmm.
because they don't know anything about nuclear. They can't articulate anything about nuclear,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're going to fight you and argue with you. No, that's
Ah,
climate change,
yeah,
and and so
yeah.
it's pointless to do the interview.
Ah, yeah. Now I
That's what
understand.
and
Yeah.
I originally tried to do it. Well, originally when I first done the research expeditions, and I'm going to show you those pictures right after I finish that. Is I took around 5,000 sample bags with me, all kinds of containers and everything else. And I go out on the ocean. I'm going to be gone for months and months and months on a research expedition. I'm going to take samples. I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to ship it with the dry ice back to a friend of mine who's going to freeze it and hang on to it till I come back. And
Mm-hmm.
we're going to get a laboratory to test it for radiation.
Mm-hmm.
And this will make sense in a few minutes when I start showing everybody pictures. I only got a few pictures, and we'll come right back to this screen.
Yeah,
And
because there is one other part two of that question. I put it in the private chat here. Maybe I did not see it yet, but that's part two of Artis Liberalis. Is that okay to answer that question before you go
my
ahead?
dad, yeah, my dad had that lactose problem and had a instead of blaming it on lactose, which is totally different, right? And had a four bypass operations, which is amazing, terrible surgery to have.
Mm-hmm.
Was 50% of succeeding. He survived, and they advised him to stop eating cheese because that was the only thing that could be. So this has got, you know, this got nothing to do with the radiation. If there's a lactose intolerance, I don't know if that's got anything to do with the radiation itself. But
Mm-hmm.
that's possible. Now, of course, we know cow milk. It was banned after Chernobyl for many, like Norway, for
Mm-hmm.
Sweden, for Spain, for France. They found amazing. Like I got a whole bunch of studies for Netherlands of abortions and
Mm-hmm.
miscarriages and births. There was a statistical drop in all these countries
Mm-hmm.
after Chernobyl
Also
and
Netherlands. Huh?
and the Netherlands. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's right. And we actually cover those studies, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Netherlands is now uh, like the rest of the world was inundated with Fukushima radioactive fallout, and we just showed those models. I'm just going to zip
Mm-hmm.
over and show for a few minutes. I'm going to show everybody some of my research expeditions to finish out what I was just talking about. And so what I was talking about was I got to go back a picture. The expedition. So I brought around 5,000 bags with me on my research expeditions. And that's three of the boats that I was using, the two little Zodiacs and the sailboat. And maybe we got a better picture. There we go. Let's use that. And so that was my three boats. And the red boat I had out about 3 weeks ago, the red Zodiac. Okay, so
And you all do that on your own, by the way?
I do this on my own.
Wow, that was a question still. Like you all do that alone with no.
Yeah.
That's hard, tough work. I
Oh,
mean,
that is
yeah.
incredible madness. The only way to describe it is you work nonstop from the second you wake up till you go to bed. It's
Mm,
nonstop. And so this depictions to your right is Vancouver, British Columbia, all the way to Alaska. And there's 27,000 islands, and it doesn't really do it justice. But there's an enormous amount of fjords and inlets, and what I call pinch points. So between the islands, in order for the open ocean to come in and get to the interior, it has to go through certain pinch points. And so, because there's 27,000 islands, will take you 71 years to visit every one of them.
mhm,
I I done pinch points, and so the expeditions, the species to your left is what it would normally look like, and the species to your right is what it looked like when I was doing the research. And so keep your eye on the left, and you'll start understanding the significance of the life we're talking about was exterminated. So instead of having 5,000 sample bags for samples to test for radiation, there was no species left. They were wiped out. And because you can see the incredible diversity, there was around 7,000 highly visible species. And I used to work as a commercial diver when I was young for 14 years. And so I had dove this whole coastline for years and years and years. I was just loved all these species to your left. And the pictures to your right are the pictures I took at the same places. And the pictures are the authentic pictures. So the species to your left at low tide was a common picture at low tide to your left. And to the right, it's hard to appreciate it, is the same area where these pictures came from. And the species were exterminated. So there would be around 600 algae, which are like the kelps. The sea urchins you're looking at with the spines. So normally I could never let my little zodiac come up on the beach because the sea urchins would punch it full of holes. But during the 6 years of the research expeditions along the coastline, there was nowhere I couldn't land because there was no sea urchins in the shallow water, which was normal. And to your left, you can see the incredible diversity. There was around 74 species of starfish. Each species came in multiple vibrant colors. There was around 480 species of worms, and didn't find only 3 species. And there was 70 species of sea anemones. We only found 1 species, which was the green sea anemone. There was incredible diversity. Like starfish, this was normal. And when I was diving, I used to feel guilty because the starfish, like, it was very difficult to step anywhere and not hurt some species because there's so many of them. And so sometimes you would feel real guilty because you couldn't avoid hurting a few animals. They were completely wiped out. And it was amazing. I used to take sea cucumbers. And what happens is all the starfish you're looking at to the left would make a path to let the sea cucumber come through, or the giant sunflower starfish move through. All the other species would get out of the way and then would close the gap in behind the sun starfish when they went past. And the picture to your left again are the pre-Fukushima. After is to the right. So the species were wiped out. They were exterminated because of radioactive fallout. And what happens is the radiation plumes comes in, hits your continent, hits your mountains, and you lose a large part of their payloads. And then they rise up and go over the mountains. But the large part of the payloads that they're losing washes down to your coastlines. And because your coastlines are the nurseries, they're very vulnerable to the species. And so what, to my horror, my absolute horror, that the species to your left were exterminated. And I had to go back year after year after year to see if they returned. And they didn't recover.
It is so sad because I see literally no color on the right.
On the right, and that was, I had my dog with me, and that would be the only color you would see, was my little doggy. And so the pictures to your left it was amazing. At low tide, there was nowhere you couldn't go and get yourself this incredible amount of there was endless amounts of clams and abalones. These are scallops and seafood. I'm going to stop sharing here, come back over. So there was this incredible amount of scallops and abalones and clams. There was razorback and little necks and manillas. There was oysters. There was all kinds of snails and periwinkles is a type of big snails. There was this incredible diversity and very visible, and was really endearing. It was really special. This is a tropical rainforest with 27,000 islands. Each island is full of old growth forest, spruce trees and everything else. It was stunning. And then the forest itself, when you go into the forest, it was spider heaven. It was insect heaven. It was bird heaven. It was songbirds all day and late into the night, and long before the sun come up, they would start singing again. And when I was doing the research expeditions, I'm targeting low tides. So at high tide, I can go way up the estuaries in my little Zodiac, and I would go ashore and go up into the forest. And at the end of it, I was bringing my high quality recording equipment into the forest and walking away and coming back a few hours later, turning it off and going back to my sailboat. And at nighttime, then I would play it and listen, and there'd be nothing. And then I would use the spotlights at night times and go along the coastline. And normally at low tide, you would see all these eyes from the crabs and other species looking back at you, reflecting,
Mm.
and there'd be nothing. There is nothing.
Mm.
And years ago, whenever we had the dogs up on the coastline, they would go nuts because of all the little species. They're going around smelling everything and peeing on everything. You know what a dog does, right?
Yeah.
And my dog never went after nothing. It never tried to chase anything. It never went around sniffing anything. It would jump off the boat, take a little pee, and get back into the boat and lie down because there was nothing for it to do.
Yeah.
It was absolutely
Sad.
boring. So
Yeah.
instead of going up and chasing a squirrel or something like this, tracing the tracks of something. And there used to be all these incredible reindeers these up in this area, and the reindeers were the size of a 10-pound dog. So you got
Hmm.
these reindeers; they're about yay big, and they're about this tall with a full set of antlers, and they're completely. They don't understand fear. They don't know what you are. There's no predators up there to worry about. And so it was amazing. There'd be little herds of these would come down and look at you.
Hmm.
But when I was up there, I never seen any sign of it whatsoever. It was a total extinction event.
Oh.
Now, yeah, so that this was such a highly visible area, and at the high tide line, there was 30,000 well-known insects that would live at the high tide lines, and you got a 19-foot, 7 meter, 8 meter, or I'm sorry, 6 meter tide exchange. So around 19 feet to 22 feet, actually. And so when the tide went out, you had these 30,000 species of insects that would go down into the low tide zone. And so there was this incredible ecosystem, but there was also a huge ecosystem at the high tide line. There was incredible diversity, but what happened was they're really vulnerable to any environmental changes. And the radioactive follow plumes, and I showed them to those who are joining us now. I showed them earlier in the show, and so you can always go back and watch them later. There was this incredible diversity of those species all along the high tide line. And so if you came in your boat at low tide, and typical, what I would do is I would take what I call a beach line, a very heavy line, up through the low tide, up to the high tide, and tie it around a tree. And that would tie to the back of my boat. And the front of my boat had the anchor. And that would center my boat and hold it secure when there were storms. And there's a lot of storms. And because I would have another Zodiac hanging off the side of it and everything else. The only way I could sleep comfortable at night was I had to tie my boat onto a tree. So typically, it was very dangerous. You would wait for the tide to come up, and then you would go in your little boat and you would put up a beach line because it was very difficult to go from low tide to the high tide line because it's so slippery. There was 700 kelps, and inside those 700 kelps was 5,500 well-known invertebrates without the backbones. They're like little shrimp.
Okay. Yeah.
And so when I was doing the research expeditions along the coastline, so there was all this, and I showed people all those pictures of all the species. So a lot of birds, migratory birds, would come along the coastline, and they would follow like anchovies and squid and sardines and krill and capelin and sand and all these little small what they call feeder fish, anchovy, squid, herring and mackerel and stuff like that along 5,000 miles of migratory. But they would also subsidize their food in the tidal zones. So after Fukushima, the tidal zones were wiped out.
But can I ask Dana
Yeah,
again? I interrupt you.
that's great.
And that was what I'm wondering. And now you're talking about like, will there be the fish chain for also the people? Because fishermen all over the world are already excessive fishing all the fishes out of our life waters as well of the oceans and etc. But is that I
Well,
was
like,
wondering why don't we yet see that, for example, yet with fish sellers, if I can say it like that. Like in Netherlands, there is a lot of beloved like herring,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
to eat herring and fish, and I see just fish shops, etc. And I don't
'Cause
see any decrease in that yet. Is that a weird
right, I've
question?
heard, I've heard, I've heard that a lot of times. Yeah,
Mm,
and absolutely right. That's a great question.
mm,
And so what happens is the first thing we broke was the phytoplankton, which is the basis of the food chain, the basis of the oxygen chain, the basis of the carbon sequestering chain. And the reason that broke was because they're at the surface. And so when the radiation hits the surface, it has to go through the phytoplankton first. And so the
mm-hmm,
phytoplankton got kind of wiped, not completely wiped out, not completely decimated, because the original plume was the worst part of the plume, but any plume is bad. Okay. So what you expect to see, and what we did start noticing, was die-offs of birds that were dependent upon the smaller species. So um, the krill and the phytoplankton. So a lot of the largest whales are dependent upon the phytoplankton. And so, like the gray whales, there's a, um, and then you got the beak whales, which are dependent upon the squid and stuff like that, which are just a little further up the food chain. And but there is a ridiculous amount of documentation on anchovies disappearing, say, from the Pacific Ocean,
mm-hmm.
that they were skunked. There was 8 billion crabs just closed the crab fishery, because it takes a few generations before it manifests, right? So
Yeah.
like they just closed crab fishery 2 years in a row for Alaska, and this is unbelievable, right? They say 8 billion crabs just disappeared. Well, they
Oh,
didn't
I did not know
disappear,
that.
right? Yeah,
No.
that's close. And then we
Mm,
have a huge amount of headlines of the anchovies, fishermen, entire fleets going out and not getting any, not even a single anchovy. And same thing for squid. We see, and I showed you all the species missing from the tidal zones just now. And so this takes a while to manifest into the ecosystem before it shows up. So
exactly.
what we looked at in 2016, there was 1.4 million common murres up by Alaska had showed up emaciated. And at the same time, there was around a million Cassini auklets showed up. And so the Cassini auklets eat the microscopic animals. They're skimmers, basically. So they're eating the phytoplankton and the zooplankton, very tiny animals. You need a microscope to see them. And the common murres, they dive 600 feet all day, and they feed on anchovies and squids and sardines and krill and everything else. And so what we seen was a total failure. We have two different birds, millions of them dying at the one time, and they're two different spectrums of the food chain. One is for the microscopic animals, and one is for like small 7, 8, 9 inch animals. So that was catastrophic. Now we've seen a lot of that since, but that was a very telling point right there. And they
Mm,
were the common murres dive 600 feet all day. And so why did now all the colonies up in Alaska were, because a lot of migratory birds will go to certain places. Alaska is one of them, and they'll nest here. The nestings have failed now about 7 years in a row. Complete failure of all the colonies. And
mm,
so what people, when you look up in the sky, when was the last time you see a huge flock of migratory birds? Not like little starlings or something like that, but
mm.
actual migratory birds. And where I'm currently too, each year there's 46 million migratory birds. It's the biggest seabird migratory route on the entire planet. I'm currently on the east coast of Canada in a place called Newfoundland. And I'm right out about 12 miles away from the end of the continent. So I'm in the best possible spot imaginable to
Mm.
view that.
Yeah.
And so this year there was none of them showed up. And so the interesting question was, if 46 million birds don't show up here and showed up somewhere else, which doesn't work because they've been doing this migratory route for millions of years. They've been nesting in these places right in front of my place for millions of years. Generate millions of generations have came here and raised their hatchlings and their fledglings. And the couple of residential colonies that we do have here are just, one is seagulls, and it's a residential. And I couldn't figure, because they weren't feeding in the ocean. I was out for 18 trips on the ocean this year. and I'm checking on the colony every time I go out there. There's two separate colonies. So one of them got what I call a tickle ass, is like a baby, like a small seagull, a miniature seagull. That's not the proper name for you guys. For the, I can't remember the proper name for some reason. And the other one
Mm.
was cormorants. And cormorants are not indigenous to Newfoundland. They don't belong here. They've never been here before, but they migrated here. Now, when I was in the Pacific Ocean doing the research expeditions, the last year I was there, 2019, the cormorants had disappeared. And they're very visible because they have these long necks. And when they're sunbathing on the rock, they'll hold their wings out.
Mhm.
So they stand out. They're very big animals. They're beautiful, stunningly gorgeous animals, but they disappeared off the whole coastline. And so many fisheries have failed here on the west coast of British Columbia, on the east coast of Canada. And I've seen many seasoned fishermen, sports fishermen, get skunked. They don't get nothing. They go out and they can't, I'm not going out there no more. There's nothing out there. And a lot of these people will go out to get, they're allowed to jig a few fish each year. And so that's the only times they'll put their boats in the water. But they've been doing it for 30, 40, 50 years. And so, the cliffs, now how I recognize them, normally the cliffs are covered in excrement from the colonies because they just crap on the cliffs. And so the cliffs would have all this white excrement. None of the cliffs got excrement on it. And so I couldn't find any birds feeding in the ocean the entire summer. There was no migratory birds showed up. I think there was two or three birds out of 46 million that I did find. And the only birds I found was residential colonies. I couldn't figure out where they were feeding. It turns out they're feeding at McDonald's, which is like a fast food joint.
Mm.
But they also feed at the fish plant. So there was a fish plant processing crab. And that plant was what the colony was using to get food to raise their hatchlings. And their hatchling survival rate was about a 4 to 10%. So that's not enough to replenish the population, right?
No, no,
No.
no, for sure. Yeah.
And
Gee.
I used to liken the Pacific coastline, and I showed people the pictures earlier. There was enough protein on that coastline to sustain the entire planet without harming the coastline. And another thing, I used to be a diver. I used to harvest 20,000 sea urchins each day. Was you can only pick a certain size, like a 3-inch sea urchin, which meant you couldn't hurt the local population, and you were limited to where you could actually dive anyway, because you were limited to how deep you can dive. You were limited to shelter and stuff like that. And so you only have about 1 or 2% of the coastline you were capable of diving, but a lot of that was too treacherous, too dangerous to actually bring the boat in there to dive with, because there were so many rocks under the water. And so it's the same thing with the fleet, though. The fleet is limited to where it can fish. Now, that doesn't mean it can't do harm, because it can interrupt the migratory species, right? Uh, but what I was discovering, because I grew up in a community that still has no automobiles. There's only 65 people living there. I grew up the traditional way, right? And, there was no supermarkets or anything. You had to go get your own birds. You had to go get your own rabbits. You had
Yeah,
to go
you
get
came
your own
from the
fish.
same environment where you were born, so
Yeah.
also along the coast, the coastline.
Yeah, totally isolated. There's no way to
Okay.
drive in or drive out. There's no automobiles,
Yeah.
and everybody helps each other, right?
Mm.
And so I'm very in touch with the ecosystem. I'm very familiar with it. I'm very aware of it, and
That's
I'm
what
very
you
conscious.
radiate. That's so
Yeah,
that answered then my question, because I felt it like you're so natural doing, and then all
I
these
love
things
it. Yeah,
alone with in the water, and maybe also nice for the people
yeah,
to know that you
yeah.
came from commercial diving. Yeah, you
I
were
was a yeah. Before that, I was a commercial fisherman,
exactly, yeah.
and then once I got injured in a diving accident after 128 days of diving 6 hours a day,
Mm.
and ended up in a hyperbaric chamber in Vancouver, British Columbia, and was crippled for the rest of my life, and I had to rebuild. I had to retrain myself to walk,
Mm-hmm.
and that took over a decade. And then just to get out of the hospital bed regularly, and in
Mm-hmm.
5 years to learn to walk again. But in that period of time, I started studying nuclear. And so I never had nothing else to do, and nuclear was something I didn't know. So you know how you listen to a song,
Mm.
and the majority of the music you listen to has a memory attached to it. Oh, I
Yeah.
remember that song when I was 16 years old, or I remember that song at a wedding, or I remember that song they used to play it at the stadium when we go skating and stuff like that. They have memories, right? And so I was looking for something with no memories attached to it because I went from having this exorbitant, beautiful, wonderful diver's life to being stuck in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
And so at the same time, Harvard University, Yale University, Stanford University, Oxford University, MIT, all the big shakers and movers were putting their lectures and presentations online. And so I was harvesting that and I was studying, right? This is what I was doing during my recovery for 15 years. I was educating myself from all the major shakers and movers. And I thought it was wonderful. I felt I had one of the best educations a person can dream of
Mm.
because you had all the top academics, the top universities. I had access to it
Yeah, by
and
the
I had
way,
voracious
you're very
appetite.
enthusiastic, but our people responding so nicely in the chat, like also Delvertje. Hi Delvertje, and also everyone who I did not greet in person. I hope you understand I'm fully concentrated on listening to Dana and a bit managing all the many windows. But Delvertje also says that must have been a very difficult time, Dana, when you were recovering.
Very.
But
Oh yeah. Well, I came close to putting an end to it on a number of occasions. I gave up hope, right?
mm,
And that happens to a lot of people, I'm pretty sure.
mm,
Where you felt like
understandable.
life was pointless, right? And what was the point of it all?
Mm.
And I never felt that I would have my life back, and there was a lot of despair. But the best way to lift yourself out of that is to find something that don't have connotations
Mhm.
of your previous life, and
Exactly.
just get educated. Find something really interesting.
I
And
recognize that incredibly, by the way, what you say. That I do recognize that.
oh yeah,
That
yeah, of
keeps me
course you do.
alive.
Yeah, you went through it yourself. Yeah,
Yeah, myself. Yeah.
yeah. And so uh, I'm so grateful that I was able to go out and do the research expeditions originally.
Mhm.
And then, to my horror, here I was with over 5,000 sample bags, and there was nothing on the beach to take samples of. And so my detractors would say, "How come Dana's not bringing samples in? Right? He's trying to hide it. Otherwise, he would bring it in and get it tested." But I mean, I was doing presentations showing the documentation. There was no samples to take. And then my website, thenuclearproctologist.org, is full of these research expeditions and documentation. So each day I was taking 1,000 to 2,000 pictures, and with the GPSs every 100 pictures or so. Um, and so bringing it along for the expedition, basically. And then I was posting all of that up at my website. So the whole thing is documented with GPSs of everywhere I went up at my website. So this information is unassailable. It's incontestable documentation.
Mhm.
And I'd done it with the realization that nobody else was going to do it. And I would be able to deny the apologist community by saying, well, we didn't know. How could we know? We didn't go out and do the research. But because I was so prolific, I had done over 600 radio interviews early in the research. And so whenever I came ashore, no matter which port I was pulling into, I would have all these emails and I'd just reach out and do as many interviews, radio shows, and that as I can do, and then head back out on the ocean for another 12, 14 days. So every 12, 14 days, I would come ashore and I would spend 4 to 5 months a year. And I was going into these really tiny little ports in the middle of nowhere just to get fuel and groceries and do some laundry.
Mhm.
And it was a very difficult time, but I understood the importance was that, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's wonderful. But if I'm right, here's the documentation. And nobody can ever say, well, the evidence didn't exist. How could we know? Because it was free for the taking at my website. Everything on my website is free.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that way they couldn't deny that the evidence didn't exist and they couldn't make those particular assertions that they didn't know because everybody in the academic community, the nuclear industry, has to know who I am because I've been at it for so long and I'm so boisterous. I'm so freaking in their face all the time. And I don't hide it. I'm prolific in material and presentations on top of that. And they took down my previous YouTube channel. Was out looking for spiders because I discovered on the East Coast they're also missing. And it should be around 500,000 per acre,
Wow.
and couldn't find any spider webs. So normally you would check your spider webs to
Mm-hmm.
see what species are in an area. That's the quickest way to do it. Look for some spider webs and then pull out all the little shells left over, tear them open, and see what species are in that area. And but 3 years ago here on the East Coast, I discovered, holy smokes, there's no spider webs. And so they took down my website, the YouTube channel, when I started reporting it. I mean, I'm 400 miles out into the woods. I'm in the middle of nowhere by myself,
Mm-hmm.
and now my website is gone. My YouTube channel that had 1,600 presentations on it.
Your YouTube channel, is
Yeah,
gone.
so
Yeah.
my new YouTube channel is only a couple of years old,
Mm, yeah,
and I
exactly.
and I already have 600 videos up on it.
Mm.
That's
Yeah,
I'm
because
pro-
I knew the time when you had I believe
the other
fourteen
channel. That's right, yeah.
thousand or 15,000 subscribers.
It was 24 or 25,000 or something like
Oh
that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I was yeah I still remember that there were a lot.
And there's just as many as are not subscribed, right? Because they just put you in a bookmark. And
Mm.
so again, I had done enormous amount of interviews, and I had done radio shows regularly for about 2 years with Yoshi Shimatsu, who was a forensic investigative journalist that previously used to work for the Japanese Time and was also doing the same as me, where he was trying to have a conversation about it. And he had rode into the Fukushima no-go zone, the radioactive wasteland, on bicycles 3 times in a short period. And his first time he went in there, he had 3 Geiger counters strapped to him and his bicycle. When he
Oh.
came out, all 3 Geiger counters were broken because they had so much
Mm.
radiation exposure.
And what is his name? Is there still
Yoshi
some
Yoshi
Yo
Yoshi Shimatsu.
Yoshi?
Yoshi Shimatsu.
Otherwise, maybe later on you can
I
send
don't
me
know
the
if I
name.
get.
Cause
Yeah.
can I still find some? Yeah, last time you also mentioned him, but feel I'm interested about him. So is
Yeah,
there something
Yoshi
to find?
Sumatsu. Just give me 1 second to see if I
Yeah,
can.
or maybe later, but
Yeah,
do it later. It's fine.
yeah. I have to. I'll send you a link to a story he
Yeah.
done about me after I had got arrested when I came in from an expedition.
Mm,
They had arrested me in British Columbia, and when I
mm,
came ashore after 4 months on the ocean by myself, and they had gave me gag orders for 3.5 years to protect a handful of their assets. They weren't trying to throw me in jail or anything like that. They just wanted
mm,
to give me gag orders so I wouldn't talk about some of their government apologists that I had uncovered. And that gag order was in effect for 3.5 years,
mm.
which was they had dragged me into court 16 times, I believe it was. What we call here a slap suit, where they try to bankrupt you by dragging you and tying you up in litigation and courtrooms.
Mm.
Um,
A nice expression. Well, nice, not in the word that's nice, but very, yeah, it says it all,
yeah,
huh?
well,
Yeah.
like you say, that's their routine. That's what they do, and they don't really have, and there is no opposition out there. And this might sound like I'm blowing my own horn, but as far as I know, I'm the only person out there that is
How is,
showing you documentation
yeah,
and talking
because,
about the subject realistically, right?
exactly, yeah, because I know, I just know that Greenpeace, yeah, it sadly enough has been infiltrated, as my own opinion.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that is the
Greenpeace is.
reason why because it was also a question from my side, like for tonight, like, do you see that as that this is why Greenpeace, for example, is not giving attention to this?
Yes, it's originally I couldn't work out why,
Mm.
because they could have done better research expeditions than
Yeah,
I did. They
exactly.
had enormous amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
What you'll find is the majority of the mainstream media have links to donate to Greenpeace on their websites. So
Mm-hmm.
that should warn you right away. So it turns
Uh,
out that Greenpeace is actually controlled opposition. That's
mm,
what Greenpeace is. They're designed for people to gravitate towards them so that they don't find people like me. and then they get caught up. And Greenpeace
Mm.
has many ways you can participate, so you get caught up in that. They're a big organization.
Yeah.
They're out there everywhere, and people get caught up in that. And so when it comes to me, I literally have no support whatsoever. I
Mhm.
literally have no support. There's
Yeah.
one or two people that donate randomly to me, but it's not enough to maintain. And so originally I had liquidated all my assets to buy the equipment, and we did raise money originally, but the industry was very prolific at attacking anybody that donated to me.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of people who were just driven away by the industry's harassment of them. And this is their routine. Apparently, they're really good at it. There's an endless amount of it. There's over 1,000 public relation firms dedicated to protecting the nuclear industry, and they ain't got nobody to attack.
Mhm.
And so they need someone to attack to justify their budgets every year. They got no one to attack. So I take a
Mhm.
huge amount. I take a ridiculous amount of abuse from this industry.
Mhm.
But the thing was, all these research expeditions that I do and continue to do and have done, and all the documentation that I provide, which I think I have 60,000 academic studies on radiation alone, and I cover around 200,000 pieces of information each year in my presentations. So it's a ridiculous amount, isn't it?
Mhm.
Uh, and anybody that watches my shows regularly, you're basically the most informed people on the planet. They're better informed than a lot of the academics are. And so there's this whole network designed to smear you, to disenfranchise you, and to abuse you. And they have driven any good people away. And there's a lot of good intentioned people, but have went down the wrong road that really would like to do the right thing, but get caught up in Greenpeace, get caught up in Beyond Nuclear and the other industries. These are industries meant to draw you in and feed you disinformation. And
Mhm.
what's well known as controlled opposition. So the industry owns them, the industry
Mhm.
funds them. They have endless money, and if you invite them to one of your rallies or protests, they'll show up. They'll donate all kinds of money to you, and you'll feel that you're doing the right thing. You're making a difference, right? But
Mhm.
it's they're very clever. They've covered all bases. In fact, they've co-opted in North America all universities, all the media, 100%. And we can quantify that because I do 24-hour news cycles 5 days a week typically, and tens of thousands of journalists each year we cover telling propaganda for the nuclear industry. So we never come across a single one being honest. Now there
Yeah.
was a couple, quite a few actually, post Fukushima the first couple of years, and there was a lot of people came out and warned you, a lot of academics, a lot of journalists, a lot of scientists, but they slowly got displaced from their jobs and their positions in institutions and universities. And basically, in order to make their payments and pay their bills, they went over to the dark side or they just kept silent, right?
Yeah. It's so sad because it's almost in every sector of the earth, in all parts of our society, that people are
Yeah.
being, yeah, withhold
So,
from talking the truth, or are, yeah, so what
so I
we
see
call
a
also
comment.
demonized. Or, and by the way, there are some questions. Is that now the right time to
Yeah, I
answer
see
them?
one from Joe there.
From Jos? Jos? Oh, Joe,
Oh,
yeah.
Joe's. I'm sorry,
But
Joe's. Yeah, no,
yeah,
you're right.
Jos, but I think Jos is in
Jos.
English Joe.
Jos.
So
No, Jos is how you
Jos
pronounce
Grover.
it, is it? Jos?
Jos, yeah.
Okay. Ask me what I thought about uh, the wind energy and how it disrupts the fish population. Well, first off, wind energy has been around for many, many decades. It's never been an issue to any fishery, any whales, or any birds until post Fukushima. And because post Fukushima, they're trying to proliferate nuclear and they need to vilify and demonize and smear all other energies. But because there's many other countries that are using wind energy, they don't have a problem. They don't have any issues. This, as far as I can tell, is completely fictional to suggest that it's responsible for killing the whales or the fish. And what I got another question here. What do I think of thorium plants?
Yeah, that
Which
comes
which
from
you
Delvertje, by the way. Delvertje from on
which
Twitch.
right, and that's another common thing. The industry will try to point you towards so-called emerging technologies. And so thorium plants are running on uranium 232 and 233, and so you're still a nuclear reactor. Uh, and so the reason there's no thorium reactors, they've been playing around with it for 50 years, just like fusion. But the reason there's no thorium reactors because it's too hard to do, and it's a prolific amount of waste again, right? Not just the tritiated tritium 3H water, but other isotopes, long-lived isotopes. And like the most, you don't need thorium plants. All gas, oil, coal, and nuclear and thorium plants can be replaced with geothermal energy. Geothermal is everywhere. If you dig deep enough, and you don't have to go too deep in most places. So, for instance, a heat pump you can buy for your house for about 5,000 US dollars, and you're going to have a holes 100 feet deep, and water circulates that 100 feet deep and comes back to the surface. In the dead of cold winters, that'll keep your house temperature at around 65 degrees. And so that's imagine when you go down 1,000 feet, or imagine when you go down a couple of kilometers. And so the big problem with geothermal, not that there is a problem, any engineering company in any community could develop a geothermal plant. You don't need to be any kind of special engineer. Any engineering company could do it. And so you can. The only issue was the drill bits, and because the majority of universities are working on nuclear, anthropogenic man-made nuclear materials, they're not looking at geothermal because once geothermal takes off and it's available everywhere, and it can replace. So you can take a gas, oil, coal, nuclear power plant, build your geothermal plant, leave everything else intact, and then turn off your gas, oil, coal, and nuclear, and all of a sudden now you can just switch on your geothermal plant. And all you got to do is hit 1,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and you're better than a gas, oil, coal, or nuclear plant. And so the only thing slowing the implementations down was the drill bits. And currently they estimated a $50 billion market for drill bits for geothermal up to 2030, which kind of tells you what's going on, right? And so geothermal, um, I think it's around $5 million per megawatt, and a megawatt will power about 750 homes. So if 750 homes at $5 million, it doesn't take long for it to pay itself back, and then the maintenance is harmless, and everything there can be recycled. So there's also storage energy for wind and solar because we actually got a lot of wind and solar. And so you would back up geothermal with wind and solar. So you would do geothermal first because it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then you would back it up by having wind and solar. But wind and solar, you would use storage. And there's many different storage technologies. And some of the best ones, the most unique ones is where you drill tunnels down in the earth, caves, and you just compress air down into the cave. And that compressed air you can drive a generator. So you can put a huge amount of air right under your feet. And so it doesn't disturb the surface. You don't take up any extra land per se. And it's very simple technology. In fact, you can buy windmills. All they do is compressed air. And a few problems he did have with windmills and birds, which was because birds are not stupid. Because you see a bird will fly through the forest and it'll weave through all the branches and everything else. But somehow it can't go past a windmill without getting killed. This is propaganda for the nuclear industry because any bird that goes into a forest is magic. And so they have the ability to avoid it. So if you change the color of the windmills, it makes it almost impossible for a bird to accidentally get caught by a
Well,
windmill.
this
Yeah.
was one of my questions too, about you, and it already came by with wind energy, but that's a whole interesting aspect what you now mentioned. So if they change the color of these, how do they call that in English? These wind turbines, is that the right word? Um, what is the
What's that
word
again?
for that? For the wind energy? But I was
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's right. Wind
so
energy,
yeah. So actually, you say
turbines, wind
if
turbines.
they change the color, that then the birds would
Right.
not fly
That's right.
next.
Yeah, that's
That's
right.
interesting. I never
And
thought about that.
yeah, and they can put sound machines on it to make sounds too, right? But that
Mm.
wasn't necessary. They just needed to change the color,
Oh, right.
and so all
Good
this was
one.
just. Not only that, the technology is rapidly changing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so you can use what's known as water batteries, where you make two reservoirs, you fill them up with water, and when you got extra energy, because some windmills can just pump compressed air, for instance, right? But the typical windmill and solar systems, if you got storage, then game over for the gas, oil, coal, and nuclear industry. And by the way, gas, oil, and coal emissions, which is carbon, doesn't make plumes that covers the entire planet. The plumes, the fallout maybe goes 50 miles in heavy winds. But nuclear is the only one that creates plumes that covers the entire planet. So it's quite a deception, really.
Hmm.
I just gotta send out a quick text from my friend there. I'm not.
Yeah, and meanwhile, I have that is one tiny few seconds. I have to arrange something, which is only that I go up and then again down to my seat. And there is a question also in the private chat. So maybe, or
Okay.
actually, it's a remark of Jos again that he asks. You once said that thorium can, or I think he believes thorium,
Cannot be built for the war industry.
and then I will arrange
That's a
that.
great point, actually. Uh, yeah, no. So thorium, like first off, I'm against vehemently against everything to do with nuclear because of the emissions and because of there's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger that can defend against those emissions. And so we don't. It's the wrong technology. They admit that it's the wrong technology, of course, but it was the only technology they can get to work.
So
And
here I am
so
again.
they can't make nuclear weapons without nuclear power plants, and and the ways they make the way they the only reason they're using nuclear energy is a byproduct. So when you nuclear fuel needs about 18 months. After 18 months, the nuclear fuel is still splitting atoms. You can take it out of the reactor; it's still splitting atoms. And but at that stage now, it's producing a prolific amount of plutonium, and they need the plutonium for the bombs. And so the fuel cycle, which is around 18 months, is strictly about weapons, right? That's all that's about. So the byproduct, of course, if you start looking up nuclear power plants, what you discover is almost every single nuclear power plant and there's 410 currently. Every single one of them, except for 5 or 10, are surrounded by farms. And as far as you can see, there's farms around nuclear power plants because the fuel pools where they're storing the reactor cores after 18 months has no containment. And so the fuel is still splitting atoms for the next millions of years. That's why nuclear waste is dangerous, by the way. And if you look up why nuclear waste is dangerous, you'll never hear that sentence. Um, what was I going to say? So the fuel cycle is strictly about nuclear weapons, and the emission from a nuclear plant is about genocide, because that's why every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms, because you're emitting so much radiation is caught up in the food chain. These are active farmlands, and then that food is shipped out regularly into the supermarkets, where there's a host of illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses. There's heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, even Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes. And after nuclear accidents, they start looking for Down syndrome and autism right away in the newborns. But they also look for all nuclear accidents, and they discovered it around all nuclear, even test reactors, was sex ratio studies where they studied the ratio of males and females. And what they discovered after nuclear accidents was, wherever the radioactive fallout landed, which is vast continents, was they would do studies like after Chernobyl, they studied all of Europe, sex ratio study, and they showed more males than females. That's going to be true for the animal population too, by the way. And
Mhm.
what that meant was less population, less species being born. You got less females and more males. Now the males become sterile after so many generations, and they proved that in many insect research. So because humans, it takes a long time per generation, right? Same thing with a lot of bigger fish; it takes many times. So a lot of fish live a long time, but they don't live long enough to get cancer, for instance. But shellfish bioaccumulate radiation 125,000 times more than fish do, and fish are really bad at bioaccumulation. So if you want to get leukemia, it's as simple as having a few plates of shellfish because they're filter feeders, and so they bioaccumulate so much radiation. Just a simple couple of meals of mussels and clams could end up giving you incredible debilitating illnesses and diseases.
Also, clams here, for example, in the Netherlands, Dana, because
Um,
that was what I was wondering. Like, it's
yes. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah. Well, I always loved mussels, and how you say that, mussels, I believe. So
Yeah,
that's
mussels.
also
That's
a
right.
shellfish, of course. So yeah, what can you still eat? Oh my god.
Well, first off, like you don't want to eat mushrooms because
Mm,
they're unbelievable bioaccumulations. You want to try to avoid berries. Unfortunately, in some places, particularly where I'm to, because of
mm.
the massive amount of radioactive fallout I already acknowledge.
And mushrooms as well, for wherever
Mushrooms. I won't touch mushrooms at all.
wherever you are on this planet.
Yeah, you're going to get mushrooms are going to be incredibly radioactive. The mushrooms are one of the worst bioaccumulators of radiation known.
Mm,
Excuse me. And so are berries. So, like a grizzly bear might eat 200,000 berries a day, and that'll give them leukemia, for instance. And so they start
mm,
showing up emaciated, and many different types of them emaciated. And remember, like a bear, its fish salmon diet is only about 6% of his diet. The majority of his diet is grub and grass and mostly berries.
mhm.
And so we've had a few incidents here of a massive amount of bears showing up emaciated, and they were trying to blame it on the loss of salmon, which is due to sterilization. Well, there's a lot of radiation plays a number of different parts in that story because the glaciers can't create more ice because of the radiation because it's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. So the glaciers melt is what happened, and right across the Cascade Rocky Mountains, they disappeared. I mean,
Oh.
disappeared. They've been there for thousands of years, and they disappeared post Fukushima.
Mm,
And what happened was all that cold water comes down through all the estuaries and lakes and streams and rivers, and also the coastline. It regulates the temperatures down through it. So all the species, particularly like the salmon that are migrating up there after many years, these they don't have that cold water coming down anymore, regulating temperature, so the rivers heat up, and so that also kills off all the insect larvae and all the other species that are dependent upon that whole ecosystem because the river heated up so much. And how many seasons do you need that to happen to destroy that entire ecosystem? Just one or two, and we've had many. In fact, we were seeing um, salmon laying their eggs in the estuaries on the ocean, which is we've never heard tell of that before, and that was desperation. And so, with the glaciers, all that extra water that's coming down the mountain would also, during droughts, raise the height of the rivers and allow the salmon to get to their breeding grounds. But without the glaciers, and now we only see snowpack. So you have to wait for winter for the snow to fall before the mountains are covered. When normally the mountains are covered all year long with thousands and thousands and thousands of years of glaciers. That's gone. And we're seeing
wow.
that right around the whole planet. That's the same thing playing out. So
Mm,
that was another important thing to the ecosystem interior, right? Because a lot of insects, there's a lot of birds dependent upon all the insects coming out of these rivers and ponds and estuaries, and that whole ecosystem has uh, was broken. And so what we're seeing now in the fishing industry, they're still getting large fish, right? Back to that story. They're still getting large fish, But if you go over to my website and if you look up, because I do shows every couple of weeks or so on die-offs, particularly marine die-offs, but all species of abnormalities, and we look for a connection that we can connect it to Fukushima, broken food chain, and stuff like that. And it's unbelievable,
Mhm.
right? The evidence is out there, but most people don't know how to look for it. Because like I'll browse if you look at the insect die-offs over the last number of years, it's unbelievable. If you look at the whale die-offs, I mean, the whale's traveling 10,000 kilometers and it shows up emaciated, which meant they couldn't find any food along the way. And there's mortality events for humpback whales, mortality events for gray whales, mortality events for beaked whales, mortality events for right whales, mortality events for killer whales, mortality events. And the one thing they all got in common is starvation, emaciation. And
Yeah.
so the food chain was broken because we're seeing that in many fishermen going bust, many industries just disappearing, and the species that are depending upon them also disappeared. And so it's not just the fishermen can't go far enough to find them; it's that they actually disappeared. The food chain was broken,
Mm.
and now it's manifesting. Now it's starting to manifest, and the manifestation is really starting to show itself. And so they're tightening up on. Well, and there's a lot of things we can't cover because you're on YouTube, and if I bring it up, YouTube will actually censor you,
Mm.
right? They'll take down your video and give you a strike.
Yeah, it's everywhere a
So
bit. It's TOS and in between. Also, welcome to lead guitar man one. Hello, his first time chat, but he has also a channel on Twitch and also on YouTube, I believe. Who is also from Canada and so reporting about abuse, all kinds. Yeah, what is happening with mind control in so many subjects. So nice to see you here. Welcome. And did you see in the private chat that last? I don't know if it
I
was the
just noticed a
question.
comment here. I've been following you for a while, Dan. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
And we know very well what is going on in the world. Thank you. And what do you think it will get better now that Kissinger is dead? Unfortunately, no.
So we're
No. But I
laughing, but
remember the morning Kissinger died, I went outdoors to the shed out there, and it was the first morning this year I think I've ever heard birds singing.
mm,
That's a true story, right? I
so
actually heard birds singing, and I was
mm,
like, "Oh my God, there's birds!" But I mean, we,
good.
we got a whole lot of frogs here in the summertime, and there's no predators,
Mm,
and that's why we got so many frogs. They just take over your garden, they take over your garage, they take over your shed, and yeah, I'm always picking them up and bringing them somewhere and dropping them in the grass so they can get on their way. Uh, and so I have before I can move my quad or my bikes or anything like that, I have to check for frogs in the summertime
yeah.
because I don't want to kill frogs, right?
No, no. A
It's
lead
really
guitar man. I mentioned Canada, but I apologize. He is from the USA. He says
yeah,
so. But yeah, it's but yeah, I'm laughing, but it is yeah, it is all
isn't it?
so complex. I was
So, yeah.
because I was of course preparing for your the sixth talk. Dana is now here, my guest for the sixth time. But that I am so was really wondering like, yeah, there is so much going on in the world, and I also can imagine because it's so invisible, and nuclear energy is not the most easy thing to grasp, and also because it's invisible. But it
Yeah,
is.
that's
I
right.
was
Yeah,
wondering last week, like, what a confusion in the world, what a lot of chaos is being created, and we all have to solve this as humanity together. And I was and sad at the same time, but also hopeful that a lot of people are waking up and joining forces. And I
yeah.
truly believe that knowing the facts about Fukushima is important as well in that.
Well, the health problems are real,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
Autism and diabetes and Down syndrome
Yeah.
for children is devastating to anybody that has a child with autism or
Mm.
Down syndrome. This is completely out of control post Fukushima.
Yeah.
And Alzheimer's and dementia, we're seeing like clusters of people here where I'm to.
Yeah, here
in
too.
a 1 week period, like just dropping dead,
Yeah.
walking down the road, just dropping dead. People
Mm.
in their 40s and 50s,
Mm.
and you talk to the people that've been here all their lives, and they'll say, "I've never seen nothing like that. I
Mm.
never even heard tell of anything like this." It's just
Mm.
my friend's 50 years old, got Alzheimer's, and I got a
Mm.
sister and brother, both of them, with one with Alzheimer's, one with dementia here. And it happened so fast, I can't wrap my mind around it.
Yeah,
They
that's.
were fine, right? And then
Mm.
and
It's
then all of a sudden, wow,
it's one of the saddest, yeah,
that's
illnesses
horrifying.
because yeah, it's so
But
sad. I
but
also came across it from a close, and also by the way, autism and ADHD. Do I say that well? But also, I
yeah,
realized more and more people, and it has become so common, and I'm sad for the people that they are diagnosed in that. But I'm also saddened that it's just gradually becoming a normal. That is what happens in this world too, sadly enough, I believe. But
well, okay. So a lot of people are have heard about the tanks and the wastewater and tritium and stuff like that, right? And that's big media now for about 2 years straight out of Japan. They're trying to direct you away from the meltdowns, direct you away from the facts that they never stopped growing food in Japan, directing you away from the fact they picked up 30 million 1 ton bags in Japan. 30 million.
hmm, yeah,
30 million.
yeah,
So to put that in perspective, if you took a 1 ton bag and put it in the back of a pickup truck, that's 30 million 1 ton pickup trucks.
hmm,
Bumper to bumper, that's 5 rows of traffic around the planet continuously. 5 rows of traffic. So
yeah,
that's what they picked up, which is this is only 3% of the land that they can access because of the forests and the mountains and everything else.
hmm,
And so it's impossible to clean it up. But that was only done to manipulate the population. They
hmm,
never stopped growing food. The food was banned by 55 countries and 14 prefectures for a decade. So 55 countries wouldn't touch the food in half the country of Japan for 10 years. And so you should have never touched it ever. You can never go back to it. And 30 million 1 ton bags quantifies that particular assertion. So they've been each prefecture is shipping about £1 billion a year worldwide. 55 countries banned it, but not Canada, because Canada is not actually a country. Canada was captured by the nuclear industry a long time ago. And
hmm,
so Canada was the only country for the first 10 years. There was a few other came along eventually, but originally Canada was the only country where Japan could ship food. And so Japan flooded Canada for years with food from the nuclear wasteland. The most radioactive food they wouldn't feed to their own people is shipped to Canada, and everybody in Canada, and I mean everybody in Canada is sick, got some kind of disease or illness. And obesity rates doubled in Japan in the first year, for instance.
yeah,
And obesity is a sign of radioactive brain damage. So if you got a lot of friends or loved ones or families or yourselves that gained a bizarre amount of weight in a short period of time, that's usually attributed to radioactive poisoning. That's not a random thing. And of course, your thyroid gland controls your weight, but that's a serious issue.
hmm,
And we've seen that skyrocket in Canada. And I mean, like my whole life, I weighed about 160, 165 pounds. And 3 years ago, I started gaining weight, just randomly started gaining weight. Couldn't understand what the hell was going on. Well, I kind of guessed what was happening. I got poisoned.
hmm,
But like a lot of people, we're on two. 80% of the people are obese. If you go to Russia, it's about 3%. If you go to Australia, it's about 2%. So why is it 80% here?
hmm, yeah,
Yeah, because they were poisoned. It was done to them on purpose.
hmm,
This is a part of the whole system. Well, so you've heard the phrase "never waste a crisis," and that's what they done. They said, "Well, here's a crisis. How do we take advantage of it?
hmm,
Not how do we help the population avoid it. It's like how do we take advantage of it?" And so this whole industry now of illnesses is a big moneymaker, the pharmaceutical industry,
that
and
too.
it's targeting all of these victims, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm probably going to have to let you go. Um, I didn't realize how late. I thought we were starting at 3 o'clock and going to work till 6 o'clock, right? Which is 10 after 6 now, my time. And I had already made previous promise that I was going to. There's a we celebrate Christmas here, and so what everybody's doing here is because we're different. We take our quads. We can drive down the main streets with our
Mm-hmm.
quads,
Mm-hmm.
with our off-road vehicles. They just kids, you'll see them all the time, just driving down the roads.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And so tonight everybody's decorating their quads with Christmas tree lights.
Oh, really? Now
Yeah,
already on the.
there's about 100 of them.
Oh, oh, nice.
I don't really celebrate Christmas, but everybody I know do.
But that's now happening today.
That's happening in about 20 minutes.
Really? I did not
And
know. You should have
yeah,
told me because
no, I forgot about it, but I got a
then we
text.
should have scheduled 1 hour earlier because I was thinking two
What
hours,
is
two and a half
okay?
hours. So I apologize. I did not know.
No, I'm apologizing because I thought we had lots of time, but now I realize we actually don't.
Oh, it's a pity. Well, then yeah, for sure.
But again, we were going to do it last week, right? And so because you weren't feeling good last week, we pushed it ahead to this week, and
Oh yeah.
I forgot my obligations,
Oh,
and
okay.
I also assumed that because I thought we were starting at 3 o'clock my time, because
Yeah.
we do this every time. This is 6 times we've done the show,
Yeah.
and every time it's been a struggle to trying to work out your time and my time
Yeah.
to
Just
get it
somehow,
right. And so
somehow.
this time I only join you with 5 minutes to spare, right? And I know one of the times I joined you 15 minutes late because I couldn't work out the exact. We both of us had a little issue with it, right? And so
uh,
my apologies to anybody. Sometimes a smaller show is helpful. 2 hours and 10 minutes is still a pretty amazing show.
Yeah, and it's also I know the attention curve of approximately people is max 2 hours, 2.5 hours, so it's fine. But yeah, then then also for questions, I also don't see any more questions for now. So well, then we let you go, Dana, and I let you go, and
Yeah,
there will be
no worries.
there will be
And
for sure a next
well, we're going to do
maybe
another
next
show.
time.
Yeah, we're going to do another show, and we'll pick up where we left off.
And then what is then 3 o'clock? 3 o'clock is then at my 8 o'clock.
No,
Is
4 o'clock my time is your start time
yeah,
because we're
eight
starting at the
thirty.
same. We start at the same time each time, right?
Yeah, 8:30 in my
Which is
time.
4 o'clock my
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
And some I keep people ask me what time I stopped starting today. I was like 3 o'clock. And
Okay. Now I understand.
okay, so I got to run away.
All
I got to go
right.
out and fire up the quad, and I still got my snow plow on my quad, so I got to go out and disconnect my snow plow,
Yeah.
take it off the quad, and get it out of the way. I got to
Uh,
take off after them, catch up to them. They're about 15 minutes away from me, and
mhm.
then we're going on a parade.
Yeah. Well,
I,
there.
I, I, I just think it'd be fun for me to do something different for a change. Because
Yeah.
I don't normally I work all the time, 24
Mm,
hours a day, 7 days. If I'm awake, I'm working.
mm.
And so I was like, no, I don't want to do it. No, I don't want to do it. And then now today I finally, okay, I'll show up and do it.
Yeah.
And then I forgot about it, right? And so I got a text message saying, hey, get your ass in gear,
Yeah,
man.
that's why I saw a bit distraction and saw you a
Oops.
bit like, oops, what's going
Yeah, I
on?
was like,
And also a lot
uh,
of people say,
I
what a
text him I'm
nice
not
way to
going.
celebrate Christmas. And someone else says, my daughter already does it. Oh, no, that I don't understand it, but have a nice ride with lights and quad. And I have a bit of Christmas lighting here behind me. So
Okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're into it. I see. Oh, right, sure, yeah.
no, some
Okay,
last words then, because then I really let you go now, Dana. Otherwise,
yeah,
I
okay.
keep on babbling because I
No, I'm
love
gonna have
our
to let you go.
talks.
I'm
So
gonna have to run away. We're gonna do another show, and we can do that in the next couple of weeks, or just after Christmas, or whatever works for you. And
yeah,
all I gotta say is avoid all food from Japan at all costs. Avoid food from Japan like your life depended on it, because it does. Whatever you do, check your food, like bags of rice and stuff like that. Make sure it's not coming from Japan, because that's enough to give everybody in your household some kind of debilitating illness and disease and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries in increments over time. And just a few bowls of the wrong stuff from Japan can give you devastating immediate illnesses that will destroy your children. So, like, you have to learn to get a little magnifying glass, take it to the supermarkets with you when you're buying bulk food, and just make sure you're not buying stuff from Japan. Just double check. It's not a crime to check your labels before you buy them, folks. And so you need to get into that because they're out to get you. The industry is working hard to manipulate you. And unfortunately, if you don't find me, you'll never learn anything I showed you tonight. You'll never learn nothing about it. You won't find a single person on the planet will show you the documentation like I do. And as Ray knows, I've been at this a long time, and I show obscene amount of documentation, right, to back up my assertions. I don't just don't take my word. I always bring you in a ridiculous amount of documentation. In the night, not so much, right? But every show I do 5 days a week is 2 hours of documentation so that you can make up your own mind with the documentation. Hugs for everybody. Thanks, Ray. Reach out to me anytime, sweetie, and we'll do it again. I'm always happy to be here. Thank you, everybody, for the questions. My apologies if I missed any. I'm
Mm.
gone. Take care,
Much
Ray.
much love from everyone, but I will not read out loud because Dana has to go, dear people. Dana,
I gotta literally
uh,
run out the door right this
hey, show
second.
show some pictures of the squats.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Oh,
Would
thank
love
you.
to.
Thank you for saying that because I got to remember to bring the camera. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
out the door.
All right. Bye
Hugs for
bye.
everybody.
See
Thank
you
you,
next
everybody.
time,
Yeah.
Dana. Thank
Bye
you so
bye.
much for your time. Bye bye. Well, dear people, then I will just finish off with you or just continue a few minutes later if you'd like to share something. It's for me also very suddenly that this now is has stopped the live stream, but it was a great live stream, a great broadcast. Also, you all who were there in the chat, who are there in the chat, of course, and with your beautiful questions and beautiful as you are, you all. So, yeah, it is for me also now exercise to end this live stream earlier than I was planning. So it is now a quarter to 11, but I do see 3 hours and 17 minutes live streaming, but I was already earlier on Ditchy, I noticed. So yeah, everyone, dear Delvertje, Tineke Jessie, Nobby, Jos, Yvonne, I saw come by, lead guitar man. Thank you for joining me tonight, and you can all, of course, we watch it for in case I truly feel it is a very interesting. It was an interesting talk with Dana, and yeah, Tineke Jessie already says, when will Dana come back? Well, in a few weeks. It will probably be past Christmas, past December, in January, but you never know. So I will go through the chat one last time. I am also on Kick, and I apologize for everyone on Kick. I was not capable of checking you out there because I had to manage so many things. Yeah, wish you well, everyone, and I will go live soon again. I am planning to go live, and it will be maybe mix of Dutch and English, a bit of music, and a bit of talking about mind control live, and let's see how that will go. But I plan on going again more live also in the daytime, so you're welcome to join, of course, then. And further on, again, wish you all a wonderful evening, continuation of the evening, in case you live in Europe or near Netherlands. And otherwise, wish you a wonderful day, morning, evening, night. And hope to see you next time. Next Saturday, of course, my next live stream, which is a fix every Saturday. And I forgot if it's now becoming Dutch or English, but you all will see that on my social media. But thank you all so much. And yeah, I see it in the chat as well. Take care, everyone. Much love. And despite that the subject also about nuclear energy is, and what happened in Fukushima, is tough, but a harsh subject, I truly believe that we as humanity can get out of this in a positive way and come together as humanity and beautiful people as we are and unique as everyone is. So, dear people, thank you so much for joining and sharing, liking, commenting would be much appreciated to my channels because it's very interesting before I go on YouTube. When I reach 200 subscribers, I saw it twice now that it was to 200 subscribers, and the next day I checked it was to 199. And I found that weird, so bizarre. Eh? So it would mean the world to me if I would cross these 200 subscribers on YouTube. So thank you so much, dear people. Lead guitar man says we have to shake off corporate control. Oh, that's beautifully put. And lead guitar man, I will enter into one of your chats, and the talk of this afternoon was so amazing, also resonating in my heart. But I was preparing for tonight, and I had to take my rest before, that I had energy enough for Dana. But I would love to join the panel. How do you say that? So I will join you for sure on StreamYard. I would love to. So, dear people, again, thank you so much on Trovo, on Kik, on YouTube, on all my other channels of Facebook, also people on Indivini of Info Delen and Video News of Barry Henderson. Also, thank you for the raid, Barry, if you're still watching, if you're still there. I'm immensely grateful also for the cooperation and everything. So, I wish you all well, dear people, and see you next time very soon. Oké, even voor een bit en Dutch. Zie jullie allemaal heel snel, lieve allemaal. Ciao. Doei doei. Welterusten.